So you might have heard me talk about a book that's called The Coddling of the American Mind. There's a website that also coincides with it called thecoddling.com. And it's a book from Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt that wrote the book The Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up for a Generation of Failure. And they really specifically talked about colleges, the great untruths that contradict basic psychological principles about well-being and ancient wisdom from many different cultures. That is safetyism, interfering with young people's social, emotional, and intellectual development, making it harder for them to become autonomous adults who are able to navigate the bumpy road of life. Now, they mentioned also about how speakers are shouted down at various colleges. Students and professors are saying they're walking on eggshells and are afraid to speak honestly. Rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide are rising. And they ask about how this happened. So they go along and talk about everything that's going on here in this book. But there's a story from the Atlantic where they originally talked about this. Their initial story was about this when they first started. Well, now let's get into the book itself where they actually talk about it. Not the Atlantic story I'm going to refer to, but originally the book idea was originally scribbled in an article in the Atlantic that caught attention. They decided to create a book out of it. Jennifer Miller now writes about what college students really think about cancel culture. Stories that they mentioned here, a recent story that really caught up about cancel culture was that in 2021, there was a University of Rochester professor that was suspended after quoting texts that contained a racial slur. MIT canceled a lecture by a speaker who'd criticized diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and a handful of students across the country felt they were kept out of campus leadership positions due to their conservative beliefs. So many political commentators have written about the threat to academic freedom with an end of times urgency, and state legislatures have actually introduced roughly 81 bills since 2019 aimed at protecting free speech on campuses. And that's according to the Legislative and Policy Director, Joe Cohn, who runs the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or FIRE. Now, without going into the whole thing of politics, which is probably the reason most of this is going on, the word is that though self-censorship is a problem in academia, more than 80% of college kids say they self-censor at least some of the time, according to one study. And not all students agree with the adults who are catastrophizing. One student at the University of Michigan mentioned, I wouldn't call this speech suppression. I don't think there's a deliberate wave of average liberal organizations trying to suppress conservative voices. I think it's a question of open minds. The biggest problem is preconceived notions. Now, they move along and talk more about various political things I'm not going to talk about, but we want to move along down a little bit here. The urge some students feel to self-censor is complicated. Laura Schwartz, they talked to, is director of the Project on Civil Discourse at American University, says they've been following the phenomenon for years and have some theories. One, she believes the pundits and politicians who decry speech suppression are actually promoting the problem. And I don't disagree with that. There's wrong goings on both sides. There is a grandstanding, an over-grandiosing of what is the problem. You know, that is one thing that I must say. When people say there's a problem on college campuses, yeah, it is a catastrophizing, and it goes on both sides. And I've learned that now over the last 5-6 years. I wasn't sure about that. You know, politically correct was just a thing, but now we're starting to see that it does get amplified by the media, who are completely evil about this altogether. I'm going to just say that right off the bat. And I was a journalism major. Second, thought leaders don't appreciate the culture shock that many Gen Z students experience when they arrive on campus. They say the communities we live in are far more homogenous, less diverse, both ideologically and racially, and economically than colleges are. So students have little experience engaging deeply with people who challenge their ideas. And that high schools don't usually teach students how to talk across differences. And they also say that Gen Z brings a unique, if largely untested, set of values to campus. According to a Knight Foundation study in 2019, they surveyed more than 3,000 full-time college students. And a majority say that it's just not free speech, but also the inclusion that is also fundamental to a healthy democracy. And Swartz says this generation might have distinct views on how to balance these values. And they've obviously got more diverse. They do believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But until college, the students may not understand that honoring both principles can be extremely difficult. And no surprise that many say that free speech and inclusion appear to be competing with each other, at least occasionally, if not frequently. In short, wanting to be exposed to a diversity of ideas isn't the same as being exposed. Okay. And students often don't know how to react when presented with ideas that feel offensive, biased, or just plain complicated. Yeah, they're actually just listening. They're actually just engaging. They're not easily triggered like many are before. And I think Gen Z is much more desensitized to some of the things that their older counterparts would have gone through and how they would have handled things. Because what has happened has happened. And some of those students now, they don't feel like they need to go ahead and be too, militant or abrasive or activist much like their older sisters and brothers. Same way, like, if my cousins or sister, my oldest brother, was Gen Z more or less, and so was I. But like anybody above us, older than us, they might have gone through things where, the Vietnam War was a big contentious thing. But politics are very contentious before. But things have kind of calmed down now. There's still divisiveness, of course. But, some of the disruptions that might have been out there a couple of years ago, without going into detail, that's kind of tamp things down. Now, there's still division. There's still friction going on. And we don't know what's really going on campus, but I don't think people are really caught up on that so much. So they go along with talking about an organization called We Listen. They go into a whole lot of things when they're talking about in terms of politics. I want to go past all that. Skip. Now, they go on to talk about how the question of what constitutes harmful speech and how or whether to police it is at the core of censorship debates. And there's a thought that it's intellectually dishonest. One of the people polled here or interviewed for fellow conservatives to trumpet the power and importance of speech and call liberals snowflakes for feeling harmed by what people say. Ideas are not just ideas. They have real-world consequences. The night poll I referred to before, they said more than a third of students reported feeling uncomfortable, and 1 in 8 said they felt unsafe because of what someone had said on campus. That's pretty low numbers. So 33% felt uncomfortable. 1 in 8, or 12.5%, felt unsafe. They felt like they were in harm of their lives. They were just offended. That's it. And many said their discomfort came from race, gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Yeah. Now, one person in the article says, quote, I don't think you should have to have your hand held about what racism really is at this point or how to be respectful in conversations. There are so many new developments in communication or what language is most appropriate. I'm not sure this is the right way to express the idea, but I want to talk about it. So we know that, listen, there's been an inflammation of racist, accusations that are going on out there, whether true or untrue. Doesn't mean there isn't out there, but it's something that continue to be put out there. But I also think the word racist is getting used now just to get used. It's just used as a derogatory term, and it loses the luster of what it's supposed to be. It's because in the dialogue, especially on college campuses or in political talk, like without using curse words, people are just trying to find the most incendiary words, and you're trying to use the one word that will just make somebody, first of all, fumble over their words, and second, make them angry or make them scared and make them grovel and apologize profusely. It's like, it's word games. You're trying to find the word that's going to really hurt somebody. So deplorable or snowflake and all this other shit, okay? Everybody's thinking we could just use these certain words and that'll just, we're going to get them. We're going to bury them really good. We're going to devastate them. We're going to destroy them. No, you're not. It's just words. And for some of these kids, 1 in 3 felt uncomfortable. Doesn't mean they couldn't get through it and, deal with what was going on with things. And 1 in 8 felt, what was it again now? They said, what was it here? Oh, yeah. felt unsafe. So, I mean, are these kids really like, they need to go ahead and like, blow the whistle to, they got to go hall monitor administration and tell them, oh, I've heard this thing and I need somebody to take care of this now. And pout. Do you think they're really doing that? Maybe some kids do because that's how they feel like they need to handle things. Some of these students, I don't know about that. Using the word xenophobe, using, whatever there is. Like there's all this that's going on here. And they go along to about conservatives versus liberals. I don't care about that. We'll just move along. It's a long article, by the way. In the end here, they say that they try to do civil dialogue clubs, according to this We Listen thing, okay? And without going into detail, the idea is that there are college campuses trying to do civil dialogue. Trying to remind people that if somebody says something offensive or bad, you can make it into a learning experience. The next time you see them, you don't have to feel bitter about it. You don't have to freeze them in time. Yes, backlash is sometimes warranted, but push people to do better. That's the idea. So, okay, passion is good, but everyone has some kind of stake they can take personally. And that people should be more open to hearing different opinions in other classes. And it doesn't matter whether peers agree with her or not, according to this particular person being interviewed, as long as they care. Because, yeah, there are some people that might say something that might be misconstrued or out of context or that inadvertently was being offensive. But that's like everything. But, to be offended for your politics or to be offended of other things, yeah, we have to be a little more cognizant and just, it's a tolerance in some cases for those that feel like there's been a constant change of what is acceptable and what's not. It is what it is. I should put that on a shirt and sell it. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll talk to you next time.